welcome to church.
Hey, welcome to church.
Welcome to church.
Welcome to church.
Don't forsake the gathering of the saints. So I appreciate you guys being here and being a part of that. And we can encourage each other. So we can help each other through this life. I mean, being alone and being stuck at home is one of the worst things that we could do for our emotional well-being. There's only so much of ourselves we can handle. I mean, I could be by myself more than probably 99% of the people in the world, just because of the way my personality and who I am. I mean, I could go to the mountains and be by myself for days or weeks and I'm fine. But there's still only so much of myself I can handle. I start getting bored with myself. And so part of it is being able to be with each other and being able to speak into each other's lives and being able to encourage each other. That's why we encourage each other to be here on Sunday mornings. That's why we encourage each other to be a part of a small group or a home group. So it's not just about going and being a part of the group so you can say, well, I'm part of the group. It's about relationship. And here this morning, I'm going to be talking about some things that Jesus talked about in relationship. We've been doing the red letters, the redders, as we call it here at the church. And the redders just means red letters. I just slurred the word together one time, so now it's the redders. So Jesus is talking, and he's explaining some things to us on how we're supposed to have some things in relationship. But the thing that's interesting of what we're going to be talking about this morning is being at odds or having some confrontation or some differences of opinion with somebody that we have a relationship with. But what is interesting about it, Jesus is talking to the church. He's not talking to the church about relationship with the people in the world. He's talking to the church about the relationships with people in the church. He's talking about your relationship with your brothers and sisters in the church. And so we're going to be going through some of the stuff about being at odds and how Jesus says we're supposed to handle it. Now, you can take this format and you could use it with some people in the world up to a certain point, but then it gets to a point where, and you'll see, it gets to a point where we'll have to stop with that in the world because it doesn't mean to them what it should mean to people who have a relationship with God. And the thing is right now the world is out there trying to kill, steal, and destroy our relationships with each other. Just in the last several months with what was going on with the virus and things like that, it was trying to break up our relationships and keep us from meeting. Because when there's a house divided, it will fall. If Satan can cause your relationships to be split apart and broken, he breaks unity, and when there's no unity, then we're not as strong as we once were. So in the main part this morning, we're going to be going through Matthew 18, 15 through 17. And when I get into this, I want to talk about the verse first, Matthew 18:12, which is just a little bit before this one. And it talks about, he will leave the 99 to go after one. That's someone who is lost, and I've shared this before. I've taught this before several months ago. He will leave the 99 to go after you if you're led astray. If a brother or sister of ours has some situations or there's some trouble or there's some conflict or there's some pain or they were hurt and they're run astray, it is our job to go after them and to restore relationship with them. That's what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 18. It says in 15, it says, moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Now we can throw this in there and say your brother or your sister. I mean, it's just being, a neutral meaning everybody. If your brother in the church, your family, relationship, if it's a brother and sister and they do something that hurts you, you need to go to them and talk to them about it. You know what? It's like I have met so many Christians who have quit going to church because they were hurt by the church. You know what? They weren't hurt by God. They were hurt by somebody in the church. And Jesus is saying you're going to get hurt by somebody in the church. This is how you deal with it. It isn't that you get mad at God and go home and you don't go to church and don't have a relationship anymore. I mean, even last week when we had the whole Come Holy Spirit and we were spending time in worship and healing and stuff like that, God told me that one of the things that we need to start dealing with is the relationships that we have with the brothers and sisters in the church. Because the world is trying to put us at odds with each other. And our job is to be unified so we are stronger than we've ever been. So when the world gets to the point where it's going to get, that we're strong enough to help those who need help. And if we're too busy running around staying mad at each other, how are we going to take care of the people that we're supposed to take care of? I mean, it goes to the point where it says, like with people in the world, and they come against you, that if they hurt you, we'll turn the other cheek. How are you going to do that if you can't deal with the relationships that you're supposed to deal with in the family? There's a bunch of us in this room. God has told me, and I'm in there too. I'm not pointing any fingers. If I point a finger, there's 3 back at me. That we need to start working on the relationships that we've lost in the church. We need to start restoring what the enemy has taken away. So if your brother or sister has sinned against you, go and tell him or her his faults between you and him alone. So you go to them. You try to share with them, I got hurt. You did this and this hurt me. You know what? Some people don't like to have people come to them and say that. It creates issues within themselves. Because number one, they might feel guilty and their pride comes up. But we need to do this. First, you go to them alone. It's not get a gang of people and go jump on them. That's the world's way. Go and speak to them. You might be able to work something out in a manner to where it is healthy and is strong and it might be restored. You know what? Just because somebody hurts you and you restore that relationship and that relationship's been restored, that doesn't mean you have to make yourself vulnerable to the person like you were before. I mean, if you lent your car to somebody and they went out and totaled it and then they wouldn't fix it or anything like that, you might get to the point where you can forgive them and restore that relationship, but you'll never loan them your car again. That's wisdom. But the relationship's what it's about. Jesus' whole life, what he did was about restoring relationship that Adam and Eve broke with God. So we can have that relationship back. He is the example. When somebody breaks a relationship, it is our job to be like Jesus and go and try to restore that relationship. And we allow them to be part of our life in a way within the boundaries that God puts in those areas. So first you go and you talk to them. And if he hears you, you have gained your brother or your sister. If they hear you, you've gained them back. And that is a good thing. That doesn't mean you have to put yourself back in the same situation you're in before with them. But the relationship, there's restoration, there's some healing, there's some unity there. Instead of fighting within the family, we can be focused and start fighting on the enemy, which we're supposed to do. Our battles against the things that we cannot see, not against the things that are before us here, like in person. We're supposed to be helping each other with the things that we can't see and that we have to battle against. And if we're distracted fighting against each other, the enemy gets to have a heyday doing what the enemy wants to do. we need to quit letting the enemy do what the enemy wants to do. Matthew 18:16. But if he will not hear you, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. Now, the church uses this all the time to gang up on people. That is not what Jesus is saying. This is the time that you take 2 or 3 or one other person for accountability purposes, to keep each person accountable, to keep each person focused on restoration, not on trying to prove your point. So what happens is so many of us have a problem with someone in our family, personal family, or in the church family, and we go and try to talk to them, it didn't work. So what we do is we go around and we talk to all our friends and try to find somebody who thinks the way we think, and then we can go and we can gang up on them. That's what the church has been doing for thousands of years. That's why the church has been so divided and split up in different ways. That's why you have Lutheran and Methodist and Baptist and Catholic and non-denominational, because nobody can get along. You think that's news to Jesus? No, because right out of the get-go, he says somebody is going to sin against you and create some problems, and you're going to get upset and your feelings are going to get hurt. Number one, quit being so sensitive. How many times have you heard Jesus and he still loves you? How many times have you done something that you know wasn't right, but he's still there to offer that mercy and that compassion? So you get somebody, if they don't hear you when you go alone, then get somebody who is willing to go. So not only you, but them both can be accountable, can have some understanding. Maybe they might see something that is a way that we're not, but not somebody just is on one side or the other. Somebody who's on God's side. Somebody who has the idea of restoration, not trying to prove a point. Again, but if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. That way it's not, well, you said, no, you said, or no, he said, no, you said. It's not. Now there's some accountability. It's not just, well, you said this, yeah, but I heard this. That's what it's about. It's about keeping people accountable so we can have that restoration that we need, so we can start getting back into unity. This is not something that the people in the church want to hear, because they don't want to forgive. Some of us have been hurt so bad we don't want to forgive those brothers and sisters. The problem is we have to. If you don't forgive, then he's not going to forgive. If you're holding bitterness and unforgiveness towards someone, God says, if you're doing that, then I can't forgive you. And believe me, we all need his forgiveness. Matthew 18:17. And if he or she still refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. This is why it doesn't work with people that are in the world, because they don't give a rip about the church. Oh, go ahead and tell the church. I ain't going there anyways. But if it's somebody who truly loves God, somebody still truly wanting a relationship with Jesus, it's an accountability thing again. We should hardly ever get to this point. Everything we could do and should do, we need to do before it gets to that point. Because not one brother or sister should be lost. So if they don't hear him, tell it to the church. But if he or she refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. You break off all relationship with them. And that breaks God's heart. Because God sent his son to this earth to restore relationships. But sometimes people have gotten so bitter and so hardened, they won't hear. So what you need to do, if you've done everything that Jesus has laid out for you to do, you need to step aside, start focusing on your relationship with Jesus and with God, and quit letting that person have control over your life. That means you've done all the things you need to do. You've gone and offered forgiveness, even when you're saying, well, I'm not the one who should have to. Sometimes we have to anyways. But it was their fault. It doesn't matter. Did Jesus say that? Well, it's your fault. Why should I get on that cross? No, he didn't say that. He said the world broke our relationship, and I'm going to get on that cross to restore that relationship. When the enemy comes into a relationship and that relationship is broke, it's the same thing. And we're supposed to do as Jesus did and be able to lay ourselves down and become selfless and restore that relationship. Sometimes we need to say, I'm sorry, even if it wasn't our fault. Sometimes we might have to take responsibility or accountability for something even though it wasn't our responsibility or accountability to start with. Because that's what Jesus did. He's our example. Galatians 6:1. This is in the Passions. My beloved friends, if you see a believer who is overtaken with a fault, may the one who overflows with the Spirit seek to restore him. You don't go to a friend trying to prove a point. You don't go to an old friend that's no longer a friend trying to prove a point. You go to the Father and you get refreshed and you get filled with the Holy Spirit and you start seeking Him. And then when you're in a place to where you could do it in a way to where your selfishness is not trying to come through, but God's will is trying to come through, then you go to that person. We have to remember it's about becoming a peacemaker. Not a peacekeeper. And some of us are peacekeepers. I'm a peacekeeper, and that's one of the things I got to work with because when I'm doing it, I'm wrong. I need to become a peacemaker. In everything I do, with everyone in my life and everyone's around me, I should be a peacemaker like Jesus is. He's the one who brings peace. He starts it. He makes it. Being a peacekeeper is like doing something that isn't really healthy for the relationship because you might not be holding people to the place they need to be. You understand what I'm saying there? We might take too much on for ourselves, or we might even give in too quickly when God's saying, no, you need to stand firm on something. Because this is black and white. This is what I say. Peacekeepers tend to sometimes get to be too gray. So don't be a peacekeeper, be a peacemaker. We have to be willing to move our hearts and our minds and our emotions and surrender it all to the Father so He can come in and restore what needs to be restored. But no, I got to prove my point. That person was wrong. They upset me. They hurt me. They need to be held accountable. And I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to prove my point. Does that sound like something Jesus would say? He said, yeah, you hurt me, but I love you. What can we do to walk through this? What do I need to lay down? I'm not going to go after my selfish ambition, but I'm going to be selfless. Jesus was the most selfless example we would ever see. And our goal is to strive to even be a little bit of that. That's why a relationship never stops in growing. Because we can't just get saved and then a month later be like Jesus. It will take us a lifetime and more to be even close to who Jesus was. But He's the example for us to be walking in and striving for. And when we fall short, luckily we have the mercy and the love of God who empowers us to be more like Him. Now, I know when I started talking about this, I'm sure some names or some memories popped into people's heads of past hurts and faults and whose fault was what, and I want to prove my point and all those things. Well, if those have come into your mind, then you need to start getting to the point where you're getting ready to surrender those to the Father. So He can start preparing you so you can be one of the ones who overflows with the Spirit. And your whole heart and will is to seek and restore, not to punish and kick them out. Learning to be selfless is probably one of the hardest things a Christian can do. Because it's like, no, this is what I want. This is what I deserve. This is what is owed to me. You hear all those eyes. Okay, continuing. Galatians 6:1. Win him over with your gentle words, which will open his heart to you and will keep you from exalting yourself over him. Can you go into a situation trying to restore a relationship with the whole goal is to restore them and make sure that you're not exalted in the process? Because most of the time when we try to confront or try to fix a situation, we're trying to prove our point. We're trying to be exalted a little bit, trying to look good. I'm the one who did this. I fixed this relationship. No, you didn't. Jesus fixes it. Because He's the one who restored relationships to start with. He's the one who created relationships. We have no relationship without Him. When you go and you're trying to restore a hurt relationship, go into it without trying to exalt yourself. You go into it trying to lift up the other person so there's some healing there, even if they're the one who hurt you. And that's hard to do. But Jesus shows us how, and Jesus gives us the strength to do that. That's why we need to be filled with the Spirit before we do it. We got to get our mindset right. We should not have any relationship that we've had in the church still be broken. It might not ever get back to where it was before, but there still should be some restoration there. Because not one should be lost. This is something for us to think about for a while. Titus 3:9 and 10. Avoid pointless quarrels. Quit trying to prove your point, trying to quarrel, something that's pointless. Matthew 7:5, it says, don't cast pearls before swine. Pick your battles. We're supposed to be about God's agenda, not our own agenda. We're supposed to be about what God wants in our life. Remember, we just did the whole thing, I surrender. And all you guys are up there and you're up like this, oh, I surrender. So don't leave here and go, I'm going to take this back because I want to prove a point. Or I'm going to take this back because I want my will done here. Quit striving to be selfish and strive to be selfless. Is it hard? Yeah, it is. But that's why we have Jesus. That's why He said, I will send the Holy Spirit. If you're having a hard time being selfless and not being able to forgive somebody, go to the Father, get empowered, get strengthened so you can go and you can have the strength to become selfless like Jesus and restore a relationship. Quit being mad at each other. If we're mad at each other, how can we be mad at the enemy? You know what's really even harder with that? Is we're supposed to love our enemy. So if you cannot love your brother and sister, how are you going to love your enemy? If you cannot love the ones that God's put in your life, in your family, brothers and sisters, for even through their faults and their weaknesses and all that stuff, because we all have them. I'm going to offend people. I probably already did this morning. I'm human. It's going to happen. Just because my opinion is not your opinion, my job is to quit trying to always throw my opinion and be open to other people's opinion. But it's all about God's opinion. But if I cannot restore relationship with you guys, if you have a problem with me, how can I then go out into the world and love my enemy and show them the difference between the world and the difference with God? How can I go out in the world and turn my cheek every time and then get slapped again and then get slapped again and get slapped again and still be able to love them in a way to where they see God? Just because you're turning your cheek doesn't mean you're weak. I don't want to go off and do another sermon here. But if you can't first work it out in your family, you have no business trying to go out there and work it out in the world. If you cannot be selfless here, how can you be selfless out there? Titus 3, 9 and 10. Avoid pointless quarrels. Pick your battles. Learn to be like a duck. If you guys heard that saying, a duck like water running off a duck's back. Sometimes we get upset and get all hurt and frustrated and angry and bitter over things that should have never had any. Something this big ends up being this big because we get oversensitive. You think Jesus is oversensitive? We're supposed to be like him. Our whole goal is to keep the relationships going, to restore them, to build them, not to give up on them. Philippians, as I finish up here, Philippians 2, 3 and 5. Be free from pride-filled opinions, for they will only harm your cherished unity. Let me read that again. Be free from pride-filled opinions, for they will only harm your cherished unity. God's heart is for us to be unified, to be in one accord, to be one family with each other. How many of you have brothers and sisters and you guys didn't always agree? Everybody here. But that doesn't mean you're still not family. And you learn to love each other through those differences. Don't allow self-promotion to hide in your hearts, but in authentic humility, put others first and view others as more important than yourselves. Abandon every display of selfishness. Possess a greater concern for what matters to others instead of your own interests. That is so hard for some people. And consider the example that Jesus, the Anointed One, has set before us. Let his mindset become your motivation. So what I just got done saying for the last 15 minutes be about being like Jesus, that's not my opinion. That's God's opinion. Seek him, go after him, become spirit-filled, get empowered with grace so you can forgive where you thought you never would be able to forgive. Our flesh is weak, but when our flesh is weak, his spirit is strong within us if we surrender the flesh and let the spirit come in and take control. That's what that whole song's about, people. Surrender the things that you've been trying to control in your life so he can come in and let the Spirit come in and have control so he can get you and empower you to do the things that you need to do in your life. Amen. This week, one of the things you need to do is start asking God, who do I need to forgive? That's your homework. I guarantee you, everybody in this room, including myself, has somebody we probably should still forgive. And we need to. because he forgave us, so we need to forgive them. So then it goes into a whole other thing here. What you bind on earth is bound in heaven. So when you learn to forgive, then God can start working there in those people's lives that you have been holding unforgiveness for. Amen. That's what the whole restoring everything is getting to a point where you could be selfless and you can let that relationship between you be restored. Therefore, the relationship between them and the Father, he can come in and he can start working and he can start getting them to a healthier place so they won't go down the road later and hurt somebody else the same way. But if you're holding that unforgiveness and that bitterness towards them, they're going to do it again because God can't work on them yet because you're holding that unforgiveness. Amen. See how it all works? Yep. We got to do our part so he can do his part. Okay, now it's time to get bold. And to get to the point where you surrender and lay down your pride. I'm going to ask, because we're going to close right here. But what I want you to do is I want you guys all to stand. And I don't want you, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell the person next to you. But you and God already got something going here on somebody that you need to walk in and have some restoration in somewhere in your life. I talked to somebody, actually it was started about 2 months ago, that when last time I talked on something kind of like this, she went and did some restoration with her son. In the avenue of restoring the avenue with her son, it restored the relationship with the rest of the kids, and then it restored a relationship with her ex-husband that she's been divorced from for 18 years, and now they're back together. That's how God works it. So God's got stuff in your mind right now. Somebody you might need to walk through and have a restoration of relationships. Somebody hurt you. I want you to be willing right now to offer that up and surrender that to God. And when you do, say, okay, Father, what do you want me to do? He might say you need to call him. He might say you need to write him a letter. He might say you need to go talk to him face to face. Or if it's somebody who's no longer around, come and talk to us. We can help with that too. I mean, because it's about getting you healthy so God can do what he needs to do.